Good afternoon. My topic is going to discuss some key features of commodity markets at the time of Covid-19. And obviously, I will start with crude oil, which is the subject of an incredible coincidence of a shock in supply and a shock in demand. The shock in supply comes from the war between the three major producers called Saudi Arabia, Russia, and the United States. And the demand shock obviously comes from COVID-19 and the fact that we are not driving our cars anymore, planes are not flying, vessels are not crossing the oceans, or very few. And altogether, out of a consumption of 100 million barrels per day, we are down to 70 million, which is a gigantic reduction of 30% in a very short amount of time. So on this slide, we see a gasoline station in the US, usually crowded with cars, and which is incredibly empty. And unsurprisingly, the major oil companies are suffering. BP, British Petroleum earnings went down 66% in the first quarter of 2020 compared to the previous year. The same numbers are happening for Exxon and Total, with the shocks on oil supply and oil demand striking together and in the direction of oil prices going down. So if we look at the price trajectory of oil prices starting in 1984, obviously we've got some events like the Gulf War, like the moment when shale gas started being extracted in the US, the spike in 2008 due to global demand, and recently the collapse due to the virus on one hand, the dispute on the other hand. Even though Russia a year ago decided to join OPEC, it was not feasible to find an agreement between Saudi Arabia and Russia, not to mention the US, which has its own agenda as the #1 oil producing country today, and with a paradox created by the president, who wants at the same time cheap oil for the car drivers when they can't drive their cars, and at the same time wants to protect the US shale gas producers who are currently in a very difficult situation. So I guess the whole world was watching, despite all the incredible events we have around us at this moment in time. The whole world was watching when what we call the first nearby WTI crude oil contract collapsed to negative territories in April 2020. The contract ends for May delivery. And on this trajectory, we see a price going to minus $13, and it went beyond. One needs to remember that producing crude oil is not so elementary, and that whether it is shale oil or another type of oil, shutting down an oil well is damaging and costly. So you need to think about it twice before deciding you are going to shut down a well momentarily, because it's going to be very costly to start again. And on this chart, for the experts in option trading, and what we call implied volatility, we see here that the implied volatility in crude oil options on April 3rd was between 110%, 150%, which are values we never had before, including in any other financial market or even in electricity market. So this smile, which is skewed to the left, which is also very unusual for commodity options, which is standard for equity options, but not standard for commodity options, reflects very high values that those buying protection against a further collapse, what we call put buyers, put options buyers, are prepared to pay in order to get protection against a further reduction in oil prices. So we saw the decline in earning, and unsurprisingly, the share prices are going in the same way. We had between the period March 5 to March 9, which was not the worst in the crisis, we had Occidental, which is a major oil company in the US, which went down by 61%, ConocoPhillips, which went down by 29%, Pioneer by 44%. Remarkably, natural gas followed the same kind of behavior. Natural gas and oil are somehow substitute for each other. And over the period November 2019, which was pre-coronavirus, and April 2020, gas prices went down by more than 40%, which is also a gigantic decline, which took place in a kind of steady way, but certainly accelerated during the first month of the year 2020. So on this graph, I am producing part of my work with a PhD student, where we rely on what we call theory of storage, as proposed by founding economic work in the late 40s, Caldor Working, which relies the theory of storage, meaning the amount of inventory to oil prices and to oil price volatility. So on the right of my slide, we see, not too well, gigantic oil tankers, what we call very large crude carriers, which are parked off the coast of California. They are filled with oil, but they can't go anywhere because there is no storage facility available on the ground. And which is exactly the reason why in one of my previous slides, what we call the front month in crude oil futures, with delivery in Cushing, center of the US, collapsed because those who were supposed to take delivery of the oil had no place to put this oil. So consequently, they were prepared to get rid of their futures contracts at any price, including negative price. So here we see that under different reasons, including the fact that the major oil producers, again, the US, Russia, and Saudi Arabia, signed a kind of agreement in order to reduce their production by 10 million, which won't do the job because we are down 30 million in consumption. But still, with this modest reduction, oil prices got better, and within 36 hours went up from $18 to $26. This is May, meaning over the last 2 days. Okay, before coming to the end of my time, I want to mention two things. I want to mention agricultural products, prices, and we understand that worldwide, every government wants to make sure that their citizens are properly fed after this very, very difficult period. And here we have Russia, which usually is a very large exporter, suddenly decided to cut short its exports until June 1, just to make sure that they would have time to stabilize their own domestic market. So, and to finish, I have a final slide, which is what we call geopolitical risk in all commodities, meaning that in times of crisis, everybody keeps for themselves first whatever commodities they believe are going to be critical. And on this slide, besides natural gas and oil, I represented rare earths, which are vastly owned by China, 63%, platinum, South Africa, 72%, cobalt, Republic of Congo, 71%. Exactly the type of situation we do not like, that what we call concentration of production, which is going to possibly lead to a disruption in exports and problems for those who are trying to import these critical commodities. I'm going to stop here because my time is finished.